Hello and welcome to this example on how to use S2R to Excel. I'll be using the Edgar Anderson Iris Dataset for this. I'm going to create a new process. So I can do that by either using File New Process or Control N. The process that opens by default is a simple round trip test. It just selects the number 1, passes it to the R script on the SQL Server, and back out to the spreadsheet. Press F5 to check that, and then go to the results spreadsheet to check that it's passed the number 1 back. I'll set a name for the process as Iris Example. The process only has a single step. The connection to the server has been configured. I just need to change the database to DB1. I'll select the data from a table called Iris where I imported the dataset. Could use the asterisk to select all the columns, but that would also select the row num that was imported. By default, the number of rows returned is restricted to 100, but on the top toolbar we can change that. I'll change it to 200 so it'll return all the rows. I'll click the Run SQL button, or I could press Alt F5 and I will get all 150 rows returned back from the database. This query has returned all the columns, but I'm not going to need the row num. I'm going to start off by typing in Iris and then press Control Space. To select multiple columns at the same time, I can press Alt F12 and then mark the checkboxes against each of the fields that I want. When I run the query again, it'll return the data set, but without the row num. I'm now going to edit the R script so I can process the data that's coming from SQL Server. By default, SQL Server uses input data set for the data that's coming from the SQL Server into the R script, and output data set as the data coming from the R script back to your process. If you wanted to change the defaults, you can go to the Process panel, click Script Settings, and then it gives you the options of changing the input data name and the output data name. By default, SQL Server returns the output data set with the column headers of column 1, column 2, column 3, etc. New column headers can be provided in a comma-separated list. I'll use a snippet just to read the column headers from the input data set. Output dataset underscore headers is an R variable which can be read back as a parameter in the process. I'll copy a script in which will create the plot. We'll create a temporary file so that I can store the PNG. Plot is going to be for petal length against petal width and sets the plot markers and the titles. Image name underscore PNG is an R variable which will be used to read the binary data of the picture back in. Now I'm going to copy another piece of script in which is used to summarize the Iris data. I'll use the code folding tags. These just help you organize your code if you're using long scripts. This script summarizes the data from the Iris dataset, puts it into a temporary file. It then stores it into some iris underscore text as an R variable, which can then be returned to the process as a parameter. Running this script will return data to the process, but will only show the SQL Server default for the dataset. It returns all the rows as the output dataset was set to the same value as the input dataset. As well as the results set, we need to get the values from the R variables. Each variable that's created in the R script can be returned as an SQL Server parameter. R variables only exist on the SQL Server for the lifetime of the script. If you want to review them, you need to return them through parameters. The first one we'll get is the output dataset headers. Put that in the process parameters. All the parameters need to start with an @ sign. Then it's the SQL Server data type. For this one we'll be using nvarchar. and we'll set its size to 128. It's an output parameter, and the rest we can leave as defaults. The next one we're going to get is the image name for the ping, so at and then image name underscore ping. This is going to be a var binary. Because of the size, we'll set it to max. It's an output parameter. The display type will change to image. If you use exe, the image would be opened by your default image editor. Next you'll get the sum iris underscore text. We'll add it as n-varchar max. It's an output parameter, and we're going to set the display type as grid. I'll run the process, and if I click on the show result button for the parameter, I will get an error. For each step in the process, you need to assign the relevant parameters. Click on the parameters button to get a list of all the parameters. Select the parameters you want. For this example, we want all of them. Now when we run the process and go to the results tab, we'll see that the column headers now have their correct column names. In the process parameters, if we click on show result, each process parameter now has the corresponding result from the R variable. The image returned from the plot, and from the summary data is returned to the grid. And you need to set the grid options to match those of the CSV file that you saved. Clicking the Run button will populate the grid with the CSV data that was passed through the parameter. I'm going to save the process and save it into its own folder. If I then switch to my Windows Explorer, you can see that there are 3 files. There's the Iris example MRTS file. This contains all the scripts and the settings. It's an R2 state file which contains the results of the R variables. And there's an Excel spreadsheet which contains the result set and any embedded images. We'll take a quick look at some of the other functions that are available for scripting. If you click on Process Components and Save State, you can save the state of the variables at any point after any run, and then you can load them and review them later. If you have permission to create stored procedures in your database, then you'll be able to save the stored procedure and execute it directly from SQL Server. Alternatively, you can create the script in the local editor and then work with it as you would any other file. If you wanted to work with the stored procedure in C# or Visual Basic, you have the options of producing the script as an SQL command. The C# or VB script can then be used in your own applications or passed to a developer. I'm going to be using the C# script and inserting that into a simple application. In Visual Studio, I have a simple application with a run button, a picture box, a text box and a grid. The application needs a method that will return an SQL command that I'll paste in from S2R to Excel. Once the command has run, it will return the data table, the output headers, the image and the summary text. And as I run it, it will populate the grid with the data set, the text box with the summary data and the picture box with the plot. This has been an example on how to use S2R to Excel. Thank you for watching.